Warning: the following video contains references to violence, character death, corruption, child abandonment, sexual misconduct, biological warfare, torture, body horror, human trafficking, child abuse, eugenics, racism, overkill Lovecraftian creature concepts that I'm already regretting in post, and cringe. Viewer discretion is advised. I am in a closet, and I am articulating quite well. Okay, I'm done. I'm done. Hey everyone, I'm V for Verbatim, and that was the most fun intro I've ever done. Seriously, here's a tip for you. If you're ever feeling sad, just look at something and call it something that vaguely sounds like the name of that object, and get as insane as possible. My personal favorites right now are Fluffer or Schmallow for marshmallows, and Cinnamon Sprinkles for my dogs. That's a whole story, maybe for another day. Anyway, today we're going to be doing another redraw for story number 2, Chardonnay and Clova. The story I came up with when I thought Steven Universe was the peak of television. I was very wrong. The peak of television is BoJack Horseman, obviously. I'm kidding. Kind of. So, since we went over a couple of heroes last time, we're going to balance that out with a couple of villains and obstacles that our fruity heroes encounter on their journey. So, in an effort to be as concise as last video, let's get right into this. Okay, so with my first few videos, I realized I didn't exactly establish a timeline, so I'll try to explain where each major event from the last few videos lies in our current timeline. I'll also be adding relevant dates for this video, starting with 2020, the end of the First Intergalactic War. The First Intergalactic War was primarily between the Maristinians, an imperialistic fish people, and the Pelagarans, a warlord society that is a direct descendant race to the first species in the universe. It was mainly a fight over territory that ended with a temporary agreement to share planets with separated colonial territories for each species. Though they were the main players, smaller species and even individuals were responsible for the most civilian casualties, not necessarily the Maristinians or the Pelagarans. 2031 to 2043 is when the Astral family serves as heroes until their deaths at age 16. In 2057, shit just hits the fan. We'll really get into that in the next few story revisions, I think. But Clara Barton, one of the Servants of Death, joins Death as a self-assigned exile from the living realm. Late 2060s was when heroes were made illegal. Late 2060s, early 2070s is when Abelos, another Servant of Death, gives up his form at some point and Adagios is born. 2080 was when Miyoko and the new Astral family became heroes and the hero system was reinstated. 2085 was when a new Norcasian queen was elected, and it's the late 2080s and early 2090s when the Chardonnay and Clova storyline actually takes place. So with the last video, we established 3 supporting characters, including the initial antagonist Zimue, but as said before, they work alongside the heroes against something or someone else later in the story. Well, since Zimue was framed as the villain by his distant Norcasian royal cousin, who would be a better true antagonist than her? So yes, the Norcasian queen, the person that recruited the 3 elites to go after Zimue in the first place, is actually the villain. And her main motivation is maintaining her status as queen. Zimue and his royal blood threatened her legitimacy, so she sent extendables to do her dirty work and return things to the status quo. Alongside the main lead, she sends her secret guard, a group of mercenaries and intergalactic criminals to pose as evil members of Zimue's army. Each agrees to join her guard in exchange for their continued freedom, possibly for continued service in the guard, or individual incentives that we will be getting to. Think the Suicide Squad, but evil, not necessarily morally gray, and the Intergalactic Collective is not aware that she's keeping mass murderers and heretics hidden in her kingdom. As I mentioned briefly, this story is very representative of the Dante's Inferno story and the trek through the 9 Rings of Hell. And as such, each member of the Secret Guard represents one of the 9 Rings of Hell. This weird dragon thing that whispers of people's inaction represents Sloth or Limbo, a prostitute, yes, I drew this, representing lust. This snake thing represents gluttony. This tiny pirate child represents greed. This truly terrifying eyeball creature of darkness represents wrath. And the queen herself is treachery. If you're as well versed in the story of Dante's Inferno as I am, you may notice that the 3 rings between wrath and treachery are missing: heresy, violence, and fraud. Well, the Queen's ultimate plan for the three heroes of our story is to convict them for the murder of Zemuel when her plan is fully carried out. Basically, so that she can turn around and offer them positions among her secret guard to keep them and her own misdeeds in her control. Lynn, Clova, and Cherry would be heresy, violence, and fraud respectively. That's the gist of the Queen's plan. The entire story is very symbolic. Cherry specifically is in a very bad place in life. She's an addict in every sense of the word, and as she tries to rebuild, the Queen's forces tempt her and drag her deeper into her own personal hell, broken and left with little self-control. Just like in the story of Dante's Inferno, however, she has a guide and a guardian angel in Lynn and Clova, who help her pull through and get better for the sake of everything she loves. And yes, there's quite a bit of lore and world building in between, but the core of the story is getting better and finding true friendships after seemingly losing everything one cares about. The same is true with this story. And this one. This one. Oh, this one too. Okay, so either I'm very lonely, or I can't write an original story for the life of me. Anyway, no point dwelling, let's go, characters now! As a final note to keep in mind, class, power, and hybridization of species is a major theme throughout these characters. And while I did say that these characters are evil and not morally gray, that doesn't mean they as people are. So while their intentions are evil, they themselves are not. A warning which will make sense in a little bit. On to our first character then. We're skipping Limbo for now and going straight to the character I originally designed to be the perfect prostitute. Yes, I have sinned. The second character Cherry and company encounter, and the first they officially meet, is the prostitute, who in this redraw is a morphic. The Morphia, by the way, are gaseous, shape-shifting creatures loosely related to the Pilagera, but seen as much lower class. She was raised in squalor and found that the only way she could move up through the social ladder was through, you know, the devil's tango, that kind of thing. She became infamous for her skill, her charm, and her ability to transform however she or her clients saw fit. She reveled in the destruction she caused when her clients' loved ones found out. She also benefited from quite the steady cash flow she received by blackmailing her clients. She's a sturdy bitch. She, of course, has been threatened and attacked before, but she is a skilled escape artist and shapeshifter, and she uses both to her advantage. She did, however, fly too close to the sun when she slept with a Pilagaran royal and was forced to live on the run before her and her daughter were found by the Norcasian queen and offered a position in her secret guard. She took the position for the sake of security for her daughter. She's the newest member of the guard and is treated the worst due to her vulgar history. Within the story itself, she is ordered to pursue Cherry to create a rift within the team, in a very sexual way. She gets Cherry alone at a bar and inn, and through their interactions, realizes that Cherry is dangerously similar to her. Instead of letting Lynn and Clova find out what Cherry did as she was ordered, she does the usual blackmailing and gets Cherry off the hook. Clova, however, recognizes her and offers to pay for her stay at the inn for the safety of her and her daughter. That interaction between Clova and Lust will be explained in the next video, but either way, she stays at the inn before going into hiding and ultimately being rediscovered by Wrath. She has to return to her duties and hunt down the heroes again, this time with Wrath on her ass and her daughter in the Queen's custody. That leads into a final confrontation, which again is for the next video, and while she's immoral and takes advantage of people, it's mostly from a place of lacking control herself. She truly wants what's best for her daughter and herself, so she's obedient to the Queen. She has, however, had feelings for people prior to the events in the story, namely Clova. But she can't act on any of her impulses unless they are of use to the Queen. She does regain control over her life in the end, since I'm kind of a wuss and hate leaving morally gray characters in a position of suffering. She and her daughter ultimately escape and eventually find a life of at least a little bit of happiness, even in their tiny place in the universe. Not much story for this guy, but here we go. The embodiment of Gluttony is a worm creature that is on the run for his involvement in biological warfare. He released a sort of tapeworm creature onto a civilian planet during the First Intergalactic War, so at this point in the story, he's been on the run for at least 70 human years. Upon his initial capture, his body was mangled until he looked like the very creatures he had released into the world. So what species he originally belonged to is actually unknown. Ironically, it was his change in size and shape that made it easier for him to escape. He was eventually found by the Norcasian queen similarly to Lust, and he made a promise to serve her in exchange for the return of his original body. He's a burrowing creature that acts by dragging victims into his tunnel systems. Because of this, and because he was subjected to dark isolation during his initial sentence, he has weak eyes and is very sensitive to light. In the story itself, I see this character going after the band of heroes, whether either on an asteroid or a deserty rocky planet of some kind, probably to refuel their ship. He'd separate the 4 members of the team. Melira joins later on, and they'd have to find their way through the tunnel systems with Gluttony chasing after his prey. This is where I'd want Zimue to be introduced. While the other 3 heroes don't struggle much with this worm dude, he is the first boss that attacks them after all. Adagios doesn't exactly have a weapon and would probably struggle to attack and defend himself. Zimue would appear and step in since they don't actually work for the worm man. He'd expose the wormy worm to light, Adagios would probably catch feelings, and yeah, Zimue would probably try to capture Adagios until the others intervene and force him to escape. That was a lot of probablys, but I hope you get what I mean. Gluttony is technically the least powerful member of the Queen's Secret Guard since his body is so messed up. But the Queen is the most outwardly affectionate towards him because he's in a permanent state of suffering. His situation feeds her sadism the most, so she manipulates his feelings constantly for her own satisfaction. Greed. One of my least favorite drawings, but also my favorite concept. Greed was a child raised in the intergalactic market. He was initially up for sale, but learned to steal and use his innocence to earn his freedom, and continued to steal and commit increasingly higher profile crimes. At the ripe age of 8 years old, she murdered a pirate captain and took his crew and ships as her own. The kid wears a skeleton mask to hide his identity, and he was in charge of a bunch of men 3 times his age until he made the mistake of stealing the crown of the Norcasian Queen, again the creator of the Secret Guard and the villain of the story and all. The Queen obviously came after her and threatened to kill her entire crew if she didn't join her Secret Guard. The little pirate accepted since he really cared for his crew and all. She was given access to weapons, even ancient demon weaponry, which became her weapon of choice. Demon blades are black and warm to the touch. While they appear very similar to normal weapons, injuries sustained from demon blades cannot heal naturally and tend to lead to people bleeding out. They either have to be sealed by other demon implements, for example a needle made by a demon, or with hellfire, from which demon weaponry comes from in the first place. This is important in the story of our heroes. They encounter the pirate kid and his fleet while entering the final stretch of their journey into Zimue's territory. They're shot down while trying to avoid the fleet and are forced to confront their leader and her demon weaponry on the planet. Chardonnay happens to have a lot of knowledge of weaponry, more on that in the final video, so she warns them of the effects of the blades, and they put up their guard accordingly. I imagine Chardonnay would be hit as they escape, at which point Lynn would present Hellfire to her and be labeled a heretic by the pirate as he also escapes. The teeny pirate is the least terrible person here, honestly. It doesn't justify what she did, but she was forced into slavery on the intergalactic market and had to use her wits and resort to immorality to pull herself out of enslavement. He was really only a kid, and even with his clear swing towards villainy, he still manages to treat his crew with respect, and he shows them a childlike love that they, like him, never had a chance to reciprocate in life. It's official, I can't go through a redraw video without having some kind of horrific and comical creature concept, and this creature is the most ambiguous of them all. It has no story, partially on purpose. It's just a floating eyeball that's considered the most dangerous creature in the entire galaxy, despite being easy enough to kill. It's believed to be the remnant of some kind of incomprehensible being, basically an extinct eldritch-like creature. Just looking at it for too long can trigger a frequency that causes one's body to tremble, and portions of their brain to completely shut down or become overly active depending on the creature and frequency produced. The eye's kill count is unknown, but it's believed that even a broadcast of such a creature could have lethal effects on its viewers. Where such rumors have stemmed from, whether from anecdotal evidence or speculation, is unknown. The eye wasn't captured, but it simply wandered into the Queen's palace one day and has yet to wander back out to serve another master. It takes on the sin of wrath due to the fact that when it is alone, it produces an unintelligible scream that can only be heard by those who have looked at it and survived. It appears occasionally in the story, just long enough to be seen by the heroes. Then it isolates itself so that its screams keep the heroes awake at night. In the latter half of the story, it wanders onto their ship and attempts to assimilate with Melira since she is blind. For the sake of YouTube, I will not be elaborating on what assimilating means, in this case. But anyway, the eye is defeated by Zimue. As the creature dies, its blood thickens and becomes an infant creature that wails until it's destroyed for good. Was that enough lovely imagery for today? Probably. And it was probably overkill, but then again, I just had fun with this one, so don't mind me. Before we get back to the queen herself, we are going to be taking a U-turn all the way back to Sloth/Limbo for a second. Sloth is another hybrid creature. He's a cross between a Norcasian and a demon. As a result, the capron appearance of demons is lost in his form, and he ended up looking a lot more moth-like than anything. Because, you know, Norcasians are beings of light, and moths are attracted to... You know what? That's kind of besides the point. Demon hybrids are as, if not more unstable than blood hybrids, and are particularly responsible for dragging the name of the demons through the mud. They act like feral dogs, and because they're treated as such, they become uncontrollably wild and cannibalistic in some cases, being cast out and exiled by the demon race out of fear of what they've created. Sloth was one of the weaker hybrids, and was captured by the same prison ship that housed a much younger Melira, a ship that belonged to the Norcasians. The two changed each other for better and for worse. Melira taught Sloth how to be civil, kind, articulate, while Sloth taught her how to be ruthless and survive on a prison ship. He protected her and would kill for her, and as he spent more time with the little elf, he began to consider her as his daughter. The two planned an escape together, a plan that ultimately separated the tiny found family. Melira was left behind, and Sloth was on the run for his savagery. He actually would have remained in hiding if not for the Norcasian queen, who agreed to return Melira to him if he joined her secret guard. She was particularly interested in him because he had become a proper gentleman in her eyes, and she found him quite an interesting case study. Sloth, of course, agreed to join her guard. Unlike the others, he isn't exactly the sin he represents, rather the one that exposes the sin of sloth in others. Due to his civil nature and charisma, he's able to keep most from suspecting him of foul play, which he is able to accomplish with his diligent use of his moth-like attributes. He uses his silent wings and keen eyesight to hear secrets and continuously learn how to blend in, despite being more animalistic deep down. He is very aware that the queen doesn't intend to return Melira to him, so he plans to eat her when the time is right. In the story itself, he knows everything about the heroes. Clova's forbidden relationships, Cherry's family legacy, Lynn's dark reputation. He even knows quite a bit about Adagios and Zimue, despite them not entering the story officially until later on. He's learned and strategized over time, and when he's initially sent out to keep an eye on the heroes, he doesn't stand on the sidelines as he's asked. He confronts each of them alone, pretending to be a spirit and reminding them of their sins. He particularly clings to Cherry, the weakest of mind. When Melira joins the team, he backs off a little, especially with Lynn, since he realizes Melira has a thing for him. But his effect on her team's unity was enough to throw them off balance. They argue more often and truths are exposed, which leads to a breakup before the climax of the story, cliché moment, but I don't give a shit. This story is my baby child, and she can have as many clichés as she wants to. Defense aside, Sloth is the most powerful member of the Secret Guard. Unlike the others, he pays attention and doesn't serve anyone. He knows who he wants, and he's willing to go through anyone to get her back. But as much as I want to give him that, I have other plans for this character, and we'll get to that right now. And now we get to the Queen, kind of the least interesting character despite being the main antagonist. And that's really a bit of a pattern with me. But the Queen! We're not going to be talking about her much, because this is more about her being a plot device. She's really what you'd expect. Someone who comes across as upper class, graceful, but also very young. She's about Chardonnay's age, and it was her youthfulness and beauty that initially got Chardonnay interested in Clova's mission. She figured she'd have a chance with the literal queen if she did a good job. Cherry is a desperate, prideful bitch, I am so sorry. The queen definitely isn't interested in romance, though. She's a pretty face and a stone-cold heart, and she takes advantage of both to get what she wants. Blood purity is what's most important to her due to her upbringing in a very purity-driven Norcasian empire. She looks down on those like Zimue and Sloth because they're worse than dirt in her eyes. She's aware of Sloth's plans to kill her, and despite that, she plays along with him, in a sort of chess game. What she isn't aware of, however, her fatal flaw, is the fact that Zimue has special powers as a blood hybrid that makes her above her. She tracks Cherry, Clova, Lynn, as well as her new crew members to learn their weaknesses. But the one person she underestimates is Zimue, who is able to expel energy from his body in the form of wings, and is able to use this power to absorb people. When they confront the queen, they're able to use this absorbing ability to completely destroy her, but not before she enacts her final revenge. She attempts to grab Lin so that he is absorbed with her, but Sloth steps in the way for Malira's sake because he realizes that she needs someone to look out for her that isn't him. And as with every story I will probably ever write, one of my favorite characters dies as a hero after a life as a villain. The queen is mainly a plot device, clearly. She's just the manipulative one that gets the more interesting characters all in one place. She's somewhat a parallel to Max Astral, but a more realistic character in some ways. She is completely responsible for her actions, though. She's not the victim of a demon parasite, amnesia, or familial neglect like Max is. She does what she wants for power, and she is very willing to step over anyone that gets in her way. You know, like politicians. I really seem to have a thing for making politicians the enemy. You can thank the current political landscape for that one, though. So yeah, that's gonna do it for today. Hopefully this is another short one recording-wise. I won't really know until I cut it down in post, so if this was long or short, and you made it here, thank you. I know most of the time I ramble about stories that no one will ever get to see, so I hope me actually discussing how these characters would function in the story makes it a little bit easier to picture them and understand why I like revising these characters in the first place. I'm no Neil Gaiman or Lovecraft, but I hope to get better at storytelling as time goes on, and I'm at least less of a racist than Lovecraft. If this video doesn't come out for a while, that might be because we got the cutest little puppy the day I'm writing this script. As of now, his name is Gizmo, and he's the cutest little loaf of bread I've ever seen. I might include a couple of clips of him being a little loaf in a couple of shorts, or at the end of this video. So you can look forward to that, hopefully. But that's gonna be it for this one. Thanks for sticking through another video, and this is V for Verbatim, signing off until the next video. Take care, and share the love today. Bye! You ready to go? Ready to go? Come on. We go the other way. You go the other way. Oh, can we do the hill again? Can we do the hill? No hill? Oh, there we go. Oh, no, it's a good boy. That's a good boy. Park the car in Harvard Yard. 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 Sounds so American.